Hi guys, thanks for this episode of Nick Egan Times. On this episode we have an awesome guest. We have Tommy Vext. Tommy is a multi-talented heavy metal singer and songwriter. Tommy is well known as the former lead vocalist of Bad Wolves and Westfield Massacre. Tommy is currently touring and doing amazing music. Welcome Tommy, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks Nick, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. How's it all been going over there?
It's okay. I mean, I'm in Los Angeles, so things are relatively normalized here. You know, we still have some kind of restrictions going on as far as I think there are certain neighborhoods where restaurants and gyms are requiring COVID vaccine passports or whatever. But most of the county is not doing that. So, and you're in what part of Australia are you in?
I'm in Sydney, so we just recently came out of lockdown as of Monday. So we're in lockdown for about 3 or 4 months, where we couldn't leave our houses unless exercise.
I don't know how you guys have done it. I feel like Australia's had some of the most severe lockdowns on the planet.
Yeah, it's been crazy. It's been extremely tough, to get through it. But I'm just glad personally that we're out of it. You know, we can go to the bar and have a drink and stuff and have dinner and just do normalized things again.
Yeah. Do you know, have they said when you guys are clear for international travel and stuff?
Yeah, so they're looking at mid-December. We can start traveling again.
Okay.
So that's really exciting. So definitely going to start doing traveling and go to the States next year. The only thing is, though, we've got to do still 7-day home quarantine. So, for example, if you're going to go overseas for, say, a week, and you come back, you still got a home quarantine for 7 days. So I guess you got to weigh out, like, if you're going to go overseas, you want to do it for a long time, or like a little while anyway, to justify being locked up again for 7 days.
Yeah, and so are you guys, do they make you quarantine at home? Or, because I saw some videos where people were staying at hotels.
Yeah, so since we've obviously had the pandemic hit, we've always had 14 days quarantine, and that was actually now you have to pay that out of your pocket. The government subsidised it initially. But then they brought in, if you're going to go do quarantine and come back, you have to do 14 days inside a hotel. They're actually going to remove that now because we've hit our target of currently 70% vaccination rate across New South Wales, the state that I'm in.
Okay.
And they're going to, when we do the international borders opening again, we're going to have to do 7 days home quarantine.
Oh, okay, I gotcha. That's not too rough. Hawaii was kind of doing the same thing because I mean the islands have to be more strict about what's coming in and out. And so I guess Hawaii was doing a 14-day for most of the year, and now I think it's down to a few days with a negative test. So it's everywhere's different. You know, you go to Texas, like you know, I've been touring this whole year, and so you know, Texas is just, it's like nothing happened. Florida is like nothing happened. You know, most the Dakotas, I think it's just a lot. Like, I think that it's more, I think the nature of COVID is a little bit more scary for people who live in big cities because there's so much condensed population in one spot. And then, you know, obviously people who live in cities and public transportation, there's a higher, possibility of people getting sick. So it's just been interesting to see the different places, how it's affected people differently.
100%. So even in Australia, it's going to happen. We'll be able to travel overseas. So, for example, I'll be able to come to the States after mid-December if I wanted to, but I wouldn't be able to go to Queensland, which is another state, because they're fully blocked it off from any travel interstate within Australia. It's just crazy how it's all, every state and every place has its own, I guess, procedure of what can come in and what can't get out.
Yeah, I mean, I have friends who live in Melbourne, and they said they had like over 200 days of lockdown.
It's crazy, yeah.
Yeah, I don't even, that's almost a year, you know, that's lose a whole year of your life inside. It's like kind of crazy.
Yeah, they got the record for the longest place on the planet for having lockdown, since the pandemic's begun.
Yeah, I've seen there's been some on on Instagram and Facebook, people have been posting there's been like some pushback, and like people, like I think it was the construction workers union, like they want to go back to work, and it's a weird time.
What a time to be alive.
Yeah.
How has, I guess, on a personal and I guess your professional life, how has the pandemic affected you?
I mean, a lot. I mean, I'm in the next 2 weeks. I go into. I'm in a lawsuit. I sued my record label and my former business partner in Bad Wolves over discrimination and a multitude of different things. We had a difference of political opinions, and then they kind of went about trying to separate me from the band in a way that was illegal, and they got caught. So we're trying to hammer all those details out in court in the next 2 weeks, because those guys, they want to move, they want to put out a record with another singer. They actually stole a bunch of my songs, which is another thing that we're kind of arguing over, because the band, in Bad Wolves, nobody in the band plays on the records except me and the drummer. So we have a studio guitar player named Max that does a lot of the heavy writing, and then I work with a couple other different producers on the songs that are kind of autobiographical about my life. So there's been a huge issue since the company and the band is more like Nine Inch Nails. So it's affected a lot, and it's I've been very outspoken. I have, my opinions and stuff, and I respect everyone else's beliefs. And I think that the problem in America in 2020 is we didn't have enough open dialogue. And obviously our election, it was like, you guys watched it. It's like one of the craziest election years in our modern history. So it was very divisive, and I think people got too invested in what party instead of what was best for the country,
Yeah, for sure. Where do you see the United States headed going into the future with everything that's happening, in your opinion?
What do I think is going to happen? Yeah. I think China's going to be the new world power eventually. I think it's a matter of time. I think that our country I think Joe Biden is I don't think that it's fair that he is being pushed to do all this stuff and uphold office, because I think it's obvious that he's in his older years and he needs to be in care, and I get it, it's an honor to become the president, but you have to kind of decide on taking care of your health and living out the rest of your years, in a way that's peaceful to you than constantly having this guy who's, I think it's obvious to everyone in the world that, we know he's not in charge, but they should have some decency and let him have a rest. He did his time. He was a vice president. He's been in politics for 40 years. Like he deserves a rest. It's enough is enough, So I think that other countries like Russia and China are looking at us as very weak now as a result of Joe Biden's mental and emotional, just his state, So, and then obviously, I don't think he'll make it through the 4 terms, and we'll have to pray that Kamala Harris does a good job for the nation. But there's kind of a bit of there's a lot of a lack of faith in the Democrats because they promised a lot of things and didn't deliver any. And they've kind of been making matters worse and worse and worse and worse. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's really insightful. Thanks for sharing. All right, let's just jump straight into it. Talk to me about, we'll take us back to where you grew up and how, I guess, you got into the heavy metal scene and even how you got the name Tommy Vext. How did all that transpire?
Well, I mean, I grew up in South Brooklyn. I'm a twin, and my brother and our mom was a crackhead, and she abandoned us when we were born, and so we wound up getting, we both got adopted together, so we got to grow up together, so that was advantageous to a degree. And my father was a Vietnam veteran, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, And we lived in South Brooklyn, and, we didn't have very much. My dad was a working class guy. He was a janitor trying to feed a family, and I think I inherited his work ethic. He'd sometimes work 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet and to get us by. And then I found music. Like, my cousins were into Metallica and Pantera, and I started getting into that, and I liked grunge. And then obviously I'm from the birthplace of hip hop, so everybody was into rap. So, music just took a big form of my life. And I think, it's like, I call it the 1994 effect, because in 1994, almost all, like, the Downward Spiral from Nine Inch Nails came out. Ready to Die, Biggie Smalls came out. Far Beyond Driven from Pantera came out. Machine Head's Burn My Eyes. Korn's debut album, Fear Factory dropped to Manufacture. So, like, all these kind of, legacy albums all seem to pop out at the same time. Marilyn Manson released Portrait of American Family that year. So it was kind of like, there was still, MTV still played music too. They didn't just have TV shows. And so, all that stuff kind of, I got, enraveled in the mixed culture of music. And I had my aunt and uncle lived next to a kid who had a band, and they played in his garage. And one day I went over there and auditioned, and I joined the band, and been going ever since.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible, especially what you've done. What about the groups that you've been in? Obviously, where you became obviously into the heavy metal scene, where the band and when you joined these groups, how they transpire?
I did bands pretty much my whole entire adolescence, and then when I was about 24, I joined a band called Devine Heresy, and I had auditioned online, and they lived in California, and it was Dino from Fear Factory, Tim, the drummer of Morbid Angel, and Joe from Nile. So they were all like very extreme death metal background guys, and I was more of a metalcore, like Killswitch and Pantera influence, and Fear Factory and Meshuggah and stuff. So I wound up going to California. I literally, packed a bag, and I had $300 saved up, and then moved to California like a 24-year-old would. And I got jobs, and I got jobs working in nightclubs, and I slept in my friend's closet at his house because that was the only place that he had for me to sleep. And we made a record, and then Divine Heresy came out, and we got signed to Roadrunner, and that was the first time I went to Australia. So we got booked to play Soundwave Festival in 2008. And so we came out there on that tour, and that band didn't really last too long. Me and the guitar player really butted heads a lot, and this was before I got sober, and so I was drinking, and I was just not in a good spot, and we wound up getting into a fight, and basically I left that band. And then I joined another band called Snot, and Snot was a band from the 90s that I grew up going to see. And the singer had died, Lynn Strait. He had died in a car accident in 1998. So now it was 2008, and it was the 10-year anniversary. So I auditioned for that band. I was such a fanboy. Like, I already knew every word, and I went to the auditions, and I booked that gig, and then went on tour from there. And one of the guitar players in the band had been sober for 7 years at the time. He's sober 19 years now. And, I think he recognized that, like, my drinking and drugging was a serious problem. And about a year of being in the band, I asked them for help. And that's kind of how, that was 12 years ago. And that's how I got into recovery. And that really changed my life a lot. And I basically took my first year of recovery off from the music industry, and I got a year sober. I wound up moving back to New York City to try to be more of service and more available for my family. And in September of 2010, I was actually murdered during a home invasion. So there's a song on the Bad Wolves record called Remember When, and the video was shot by Wayne Isham, who's worked with like Backstreet Boys and Michael Jackson and Britney Spears, and it's an autobiographical story about what happened because it was my twin brother who was strung out on drugs that assaulted me and almost killed me. And so he beat me with a crowbar, broke my left arm, fractured my skull, and my spleen was ruptured. And so I died in the ER. They brought me back to life. I had emergency surgery, and it was kind of a wild ride from there. And then I wound up, going through that whole process. I stayed sober. My brother, unfortunately, is serving 20 years for attempted murder in prison. And we never really reconciled after all that. And I moved back to California to start a nonprofit organization. Started doing snot shows again. Went in the studio with Bill from Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Made the Westfield Massacre record. Went on tour with that. Five Finger Death Punch called me. They asked me if I was still in that whole interim. I became a public speaker, and then I became a drug and alcohol counselor. So when I wasn't touring, I ran a men's rehab facility in Santa Monica called Madden House, and I was doing sober coaching. So I got to work with actually a couple of like really high A-list celebrities, and I lived with them and helped them get through their first 30 to 60 days clean. And so that job funded all my recording projects. And then Five Finger Death Punch called me. I remember Zoltan called me in April of 2017 and asked if I was still doing sober coaching, because we've known each other for probably 15 years. And I said, yeah, and they asked me to come hang out with Ivan and try to help him get sober. And so I said, okay. So I wound up going on tour with Five Finger. We went on tour for a month together. And Ivan was really having a hard time. And, we came back home for a couple of weeks and then went to Europe. And a few days into the European tour, he had drank so much he had to go to the hospital. So the band was in this position where they either had to cancel the tour or find somebody to fill in. And since I already was a heavy metal singer, they were like, all right, can you just do it? So I basically had a few days to learn all the songs. And then all of a sudden I was like singing in Five Finger Death Punch. So I went from playing the Viper Room to, playing with Linkin Park at Hellfest in front of 250,000 people.
Wow, that's incredible. That's amazing.
Yeah. So, and then, and Bad Wolves was like it was a music project that I'd been working on, with John from Devil Driver, and the studio guitar player Max Karen, he actually is a guitar tech for Faith No More. And so, the record label was so impressed with the way that I took over for the shows that they signed me, and Westfield Massacre and I wound up parting ways, and I did Bad Wolves full time, and then so Bad Wolves got the record deal. And I had recorded a version of Zombie, and I brought that in. And the Dan Wade at the record label was friends with Dolores, and sent it to her, and then she wanted to sing on it. And as most people know the story with Zombie, that Dolores was scheduled to record the song. And we flew her to London, and she actually died the night before she was scheduled to record, tragically. So, I got the call the next morning, and, I talked to the label, and we had a decision to make of whether we should, shelf the song or put it out. And, I told them I don't want any money. Like, it doesn't feel like this is the right thing to do unless we give all the money to our kids. So that's what we did. We started a trust, and all the proceeds from the recordings that I would have made, I donated to our children. And then the song wound up going viral, and then, millions and millions of copies later, and, billions of streams, and then it was the biggest rock song in, I think, in 12 years. When it came out in 2018, it was the most sold single in rock in the past 12 years.
Wow, that's incredible. And yeah, I love that song too that you did, Zombie. Like, it's amazing, mate. Like, it's really incredibly done as well. I really like that.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
What are some of the key learnings that I guess you've taken out of your career so far that really stand out for you?
I mean, unfortunately, I've learned that, and I've had my own business before, so, when I was a sober coach, I wound up opening up my own company, and then I took on other coaches and put them with clients and managed them. And I think the music industry, how it's different is it's the only business where you're allowed to be ripped off, and everyone's like, oh, it's like not a big deal, and so unfortunately the artists are normally not business savvy, and so they get taken advantage of, and there are a lot of backdoor deals, and lawyers will work as A&R, and then they'll be trying to get their artists to sign with a label, but it's in their own best interest because they're getting paid on the side to go scout out on, and it's just like a lot of shady shit that goes on. So the record labels will spend money from your budget thinking you don't know that you have to pay it back, and they kind of, in order to control the artists, they keep you in debt. So they make a debt racket, so you're kind of never okay. So you keep having to go in the studio. You can never really take a vacation or take a break, and that's just kind of how they put people to work. So it's not. I wouldn't recommend it, as somebody who's had, gold and platinum and diamond and double platinum success. I still would not recommend it because the funny thing was I left when the band split in January. I focused on starting a merchandise company, and then, I did a GoFundMe to fund my album. And in the first 3 months of 2021, I had brought in more money than 4 years of being on a major label. It's that severe, the financial extraction. And the problem is that the psychology of the managers and the labels, in this, in particular, Better Noise Music, is that they kind of abuse you and then expect you to be grateful. So when accounting and you're looking at spreadsheets and you're looking at expenses and you're seeing all these mistakes being done and you're calling it out, they're like, well, you should just be grateful. Like, look at all the success we got. I'm like, well, I provide the material that is successful. Yeah. You know what I mean? So why don't I get paid? So it's definitely a treacherous industry, and I think that any musicians that are serious about their career, I think that it would do any artist a great deal of service to read legal volumes on the music industry so they can get antiquated with what all the tricks and all the ways that they're going to potentially attempt to take advantage of you if you're not well versed in how the industry works.
Yeah, that's really great advice. 100% think it's really great advice. Tell me about the process of the songs that you've written and that you're going to obviously write in the future. What makes a good song? How do you get inspiration and motivation to write the songs?
I mean, I predominantly in Bad Wolves, Um, so songs like Zombie, I did with my buddy Philip Naslin, who's a Swedish producer, and we actually put that idea together in 2016. And so I was sitting on it for a while, and and then when I signed with the label, I brought it to them as a potential single, and they thought it was great, you know. And then it was interesting because the guys in the band didn't want to have a cover on the record to begin with, and so I was kind of like, if I could get her to sing on it, then they'll be okay with it, you know. But then songs like "Remember When," I wrote with Drew Falk, who's he's a producer and a songwriter. Zoltan Bathory actually helped a little bit with the format of the song. Sober is a song that I did with Drew. Killing Me Slowly is a song that I did with Drew. Hear Me Now is a song that the top line was written by a guy named Brandon Sammons. It originally was just piano and a vocal. And then I took it and redid the whole thing and then brought it to Max, our studio guitar player. Then took it to Philip and then had Diamante sing on it. You know, I had played it for the CEO of the label and he wanted to, you know, help get his artist trajectory. So we ended up making it a duet. You know, and there's all different ways that sometimes, you know, my drummer would write songs with Max and they would just send me the songs and I'll sing on them, but I'll also edit them because there might be too many parts or it might be meandering and kind of condense and cut the fat out and trim it because I have a good like overview of how the song should flow. I think sometimes instrumentalists, they get too inside their head when they're so close to it and the things that they think are super intricate and important to the song, the average listener doesn't even know what that is. You know, or it messes with their focus or their attention. So, you know, there's just all different kinds of ways.
Awesome. What inspires you daily?
I mean, right now, you know, I mean, I think everybody who's I think the everybody who's gone through, you know, 2020 and 2021 can relate to, you know, the mental health aspect of what COVID has done to us and how we feel separated from our loved ones. And, you know, I mean, a lot for the lockdown, you know, the definition of a lockdown is a course of action to ensure containment of prisoners. That's the actual Webster's Dictionary definition of a lockdown. Mm-hmm. So, you know, people feel like they're in prison, you know, and it's kind of hard. And I think I've always been an advocate for mental health. You know, I'm an attempted suicide survivor, and anti-suicide has been a big part of my songs and a big part of my what I talk about on stage. And I think, you know, people, you know, when I was going through the worst times of my life, it was music that pulled me through it, and the people that I looked up to that made it. And so I think artists definitely have a social responsibility, and I think that's just kind of what has motivated me. I wound up making 4 albums during quarantine. You know, I did a double covers album, and then I recorded and wrote 90% of the new Bad Wolves record. And then when the band had the split, they confiscated all my songs and got a new singer to re-sing them. So I went in the studio and I made a whole other record. So I just stay busy, you know. I think that telling the truth is the most important thing that I can do, and so I try to do that with my platform. I try to do that with my music. It gets a little bit more and more difficult, you know, because I never shy away from touching on hot topics, and I think that humanity's better when we're able to have those discussions.
Yeah, for sure. What's the best advice you've ever received?
The best advice?
Yeah.
Courage is not the absence of fear.
Nice.
You know, so it's like anything that, you know, you don't need courage to do something you're not afraid of. You need courage in the face of fear. And I think, you know, a decision to be courageous when there's a high risk builds character. It says a lot about who you are.
Yeah, for sure. Tell me about your solo career now and what you're currently up to.
I mean, basically, I have a few things going on. So, you know, I did 22 covers in 2020, and we're currently fighting over who's going to release them, and am I going to get them, and that's part of the legal battle with the label, as well as a bunch of songs that were written for Bad Wolves that they've confiscated, whether I'm going to get ownership of those again. And then I've just been busy working on material. You know, I just want to stretch. You know, I think once I'm free, I won't have so many boundaries, and I don't have to specifically do rock or specifically do this. There's a lot of hip hop artists that want me to do collaborations, without a label, I can collaborate with whatever artist I want to. I got Busta Rhymes in my DMs asking me about stuff, and he's like one of my favorite rapper of all time, but I can't do anything because the label has the potentiality to ruin it. You know. And so unfortunately, in this industry, slavery is very much alive and well, and a lot of these CEOs view their artists as slaves, and they want you to say what they want, they want you to do what they want you to represent and speak on behalf of the views that they want. And the problem is that for me, coming from being a working class family, and I don't have the same values as someone who was born with a billionaire father. I don't have the same values of someone who was born rich. The things that are important to me are not important it's not the same as what's important to someone who's never known struggle, you know, or never known hardship. And I think that it's increasingly frustrating for people who are born with a silver spoon and have a lot of money and power and are very spoiled to understand the needs of the everyday man, woman, and child, because they're so separated from us. And I think that's where the disconnect happens in the industry, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's really, really good insights. What you've obviously done a bit of touring. What's some of the best tours and best memories you can recall so far?
Oh, I've had so many. I mean, we toured in Australia. We did 3 shows with Bad Wolves. We did 3 shows with Nickelback, and I had actually just been in Australia because my ex-girlfriend's from Brisbane, so I was spending a lot of off time there, and I completely fell in love with the country, and I made so many friends, and you know, I think Australia is a very special place to me. The people are very special, and I think I feel like Americans could learn a lot from Australians on how you guys deal with each other and treat each other. And it's just a more easygoing place. You know, I feel like people are you know, less drama and more about what's important in life, especially versus Los Angeles. So, I definitely have great memories of Australia. I definitely loved going to Europe. You know, the last tour I did with Bad Wolves in Europe was with Megadeth, and you know, Dave is Dave Ellison, the bass player of Megadeth, is like a mentor of mine, and Five Finger Death Punch was on the tour, and you know, I had taken a girl that I was dating with me for 2 weeks on the European tour. She had never been to Europe, so it's also exciting when you get to share stuff like that with somebody who's never been there, because it makes it new all over again for you. You know, and so that I think it was, I think it was cool. We had a really good time. It was comfortable, and We got to play Wembley for the first time. You know, and I don't know. I think too, like in 2020, in April of 2020, I played a small tour in Texas as a solo artist. And I think the first show, you know, I hadn't stepped on a stage in like 16 months. And I broke down crying on stage. You know, at the end of the set, I just was like so, you know, there was like 1,000 people there. It wasn't like a big, huge show, but it was just like, you could feel the energy in the room of how much people needed to be together again, you know, and to experience music again and to connect. You know, we're not supposed to be separated from each other. We're not meant to be in cubicles or live on the internet. You know, we have to touch base. We have to have contact. That's what makes our lives good.
100%. We're a social species. We need to be connected. So I couldn't agree more with you. That is so true. If you could go back in time and you were 18 again and you could change anything, what would you change?
If I could change anything,
yeah.
I mean, I would have. You know, I didn't have very much direction. You know, my family was a broken family. My dad, he relapsed into alcoholism when I was about 13 or 14. And then my mom, my sister left, you know, and so I kind of was like left to fend for myself. And I got involved in a lot of, you know, bullshit, to be honest. You know, I was hanging out in the streets with the wrong kinds of people, doing the wrong kinds of things, getting in trouble. I didn't have anybody older than me who cared to tell me to do better. And I think that if I could go back, I probably would have gave myself some structure and saved myself a lot of scrapes and bruises, so to speak.
Yeah, that's really good. And where do you see yourself in 10 years? What does the future look like?
For me? Oh, I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. I feel like the future's so uncertain, you know? I think America is going to have a revolutionary war. I think there's going to be in the next year, probably in the next 18 months to 2 years. I can feel the temperature, you know, and people are really, really angry, and there's a lot of confusion still. And I just think it's boiling up, you know, and the media has done a fantastic job in America of completely dividing the country to the point where, you know, it's almost like there is like a whole generation of kids who hate America, but they don't know anything else, you know. So it's kind of strange to me. So I don't know where I'll be in 10 years. I'll probably live in the woods in the middle of nowhere, you know what I mean, with a family and guns and farm my own vegetables. Like, to be honest, I'm just kind of like, I've lived a really interesting life, and I'm not an old man yet, but I have like old man soul, and I just like want to be all away from everybody. I just want to work out every day and go be in nature and, you know, eat steak. That's it.
Nice. Tommy, thanks for coming on the podcast. I do appreciate it. I think you've done amazing things, and your trajectory too with what you're doing is amazing. And yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.